Hello. Okay, this is my my video camera wasn't working for a second. Anyway, today I'm going to talk about various bodybuilding diets. These diets aren't necessarily only used by bodybuilders, but these diets are among the most popular used in bodybuilding. And the first thing I want to say about diets or nutrition related to bodybuilding is that what works for one person won't work for another. What I mean by that is some people, for example, are more sensitive to carbohydrate intake. They tend to be what they call insulin insensitive, where carbohydrates tend to slow down fat loss or even maintain fat. And the best way for the person who is insulin insensitive to lose excess fat is to lower their carbohydrate intake. I know there's several people would argue this point and say that insulin is just a minor player and calories are everything. Calories do count, but there are certain, it's more than just calories. It's the way, there's hormones involved, there's gastrointestinal peptides, there's a lot of things involved in whether diets work successfully or not. I don't want to go into the technical details of the biochemistry of diets and food digestion. I just want to talk here about the various popular diets that bodybuilders might use, the pros and the cons. The first one I'm going to talk about is the paleolithic diet. The Paleolithic diet was developed a couple of years ago in the late 80s. It's based on the notion that the man's genetic makeup, so to speak, hasn't changed in 10,000 years. With the coming of the industrial age, certain foods, let's say processed foods, came into being or popularity that the body wasn't accustomed to ingesting and causes all kinds of health problems. Such as grains and refined sugars and all that. So the Paleolithic diet aspires to more or less mimic the way, let's say, Paleolithic man or Stone Age man ate. In other words, it tries to mimic the type of diet they had. Of course, in 2022, this isn't quite possible because the foods that a Paleolithic man ate, a lot of them aren't available today. And if they are, they're not freely available. Most people get their foods not by hunting, but by rather buying in the supermarket. But still, the Paleolithic diet tries to adhere to certain, let's say, macronutrient profiles, which is basically a fairly high protein, moderate carbohydrate, moderate fat intake. And as I said, grains are prohibited. They don't allow no refined carbohydrates. The high protein nature, I should also add, before I forget, is that the truth of the matter is that the Paleolithic diet is kind of a gimmick in the sense that nobody really knows exactly how Paleolithic man ate. There's only possible guess. It's basically guesswork. Some anthropologists say that Paleolithic man consumed stuff like berries and more carbohydrates. Other people say that, well, they stuck strictly to meat when they could get it. But that's what it boils down to. Paleolithic man ate what they could get. There was no supermarkets, and so the Paleolithic diet is kind of a gimmick. But from a bodybuilding perspective, it's not a bad diet, not a bad diet at all. What are the negative aspects? The negative aspects are that if you follow it exactly as listed, in other words, with the allotted foods, you could be deficient in calcium because it doesn't allow dairy foods. Dairy foods like milk and that type of thing, they're considered modern foods that didn't exist in the Paleolithic era. So they're banned on the diet. So the diet's deficient in calcium. Also could be deficient in iodine unless you eat a lot of fish, that type of thing. But other than that, it's not a bad diet. It's a pretty good year-round diet to stay on. It can be adjusted. For example, if you're a bodybuilder training for a contest and you want to lose body fat, you can adjust the diet merely by reducing the carbohydrate intake, keeping the protein and fat moderate, and just lowering the carbohydrate. You could stay on the Paleolithic diet. So it's not a bad diet. A lot of people condemn it because it's kind of gimmicky, but really, if you look at the foods that are allotted on the diet, it's not a bad diet, really. But it's a whole industry. People sell Paleolithic cookbooks, Paleolithic this, Paleolithic that. People are making money off it. So next one I want to talk about is fairly popular now. It's called the carnivore diet. Carnivore diet's not that much different than the paleo, except it excludes even more foods. The carnivore diet is basically a all protein diet. And they don't allow any fruits or vegetables. It's just purely meat. Now, I got to tell you, when I competed in bodybuilding, I kind of used a carnivore diet to get in shape. My main diet was meat and eggs. And those are foods that are allowed on the carnivore diet. That's all I ate. I literally ate meat, lean meat, and eggs. I ate whole eggs. I never ate egg whites, which I think is absolutely absurd. Even 50 years ago, I knew that it was idiotic to live on egg whites. So I ate meat and eggs, and it worked very well to get me in shape. I lost all my body fat. Again, there's problems with the carnivore diet. A lot of people will tell you how it cures joint pain and all these miracle stories, but the truth of the matter is the biggest problem from what I could see with the carnivore diet is that it completely lacks dietary fiber. And that's a big problem because dietary fiber is extremely important for health. For years, they thought the only thing that dietary fiber did was basically help you go to the bathroom. It kind of moved forward, prevented constipation, that type of thing. Now they know that the dietary fiber, there's two kinds, insoluble and soluble. They now know that soluble fiber basically is food for the group of for the population of organisms that include bacteria, fungi, other organisms that reside in the large intestine or the colon, collectively known as the intestinal microbiome. And this is a burgeoning area of research in medicine. It's the intestinal microbiome is tremendously important. It affects every part of your body from head to toe. It plays a huge role in bodybuilding success. A lot of it, it determines how you use carbohydrates, protein, fat. Very important to keep a diverse population of intestinal bacteria. And unfortunately, fiber is their main food. Fiber and also what they call prebiotics, like fermented foods, sauerkraut, yogurt, that type of thing. This is what keeps the microbiome healthy. What makes it unhealthy is refined foods, refined grains, that type of thing. So the biggest problem, again, with the carnivore diet, the lack of dietary fiber. In fact, I've seen carnivore diet advocates, who actually try and say that fiber is very bad for you. And they act like a lack of fiber is one of the features of the diet. But let me tell you something. Sooner or later, if you stay on that diet for any length of time, we're talking the carnivore diet, you will have problems because you're going to cause what they call dysbiosis, which is a imbalance of the population of organisms in the intestinal microbiome. That's going to lead to all kinds of health problems because, among other things, 99% of your immune response involves a communication between the intestinal microbiome and your immune system. In fact, they now know there's been studies out that show that people who have a fairly healthy intestinal microbiome, if they get COVID, they never get the serious cases because it keeps their immune system strong. They're not the ones that are going to wind up on respirators or dying. So the carnivore diet's it's a good diet to lose body fat on. I did it myself, but I think it's better for short-term use. I don't think it's good for year-round use. It's lacking in a lot of essential nutrients. I've talked about this, and I had a huge article on it in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. You can subscribe to that, Applied Metabolics, for details on which nutrients are lacking in the carnivore diet. But it is lacking some nutrients and you can get in trouble if you don't take supplements with it and you stay on it an extended time. Short term, it's not going to hurt you. I'm talking a month, 2 months, not going to hurt you, the carnivore diet. Although, it does lack calcium, which is a little bit of a problem. So right away you need to supplement with calcium. And if you don't eat fish, I think you should also take fish oil on a carnivore diet. Moving on to the next one is the diet that I basically favored when I was in bodybuilding competition, favored by a lot of current bodybuilders, which is the low carbohydrate, high fat diet. This diet gets a lot of critiques. For example, they say that the fat content of the low carbohydrate, high fat diet will raise levels of low density lipoprotein, which is when it's elevated, LDL or low density lipoprotein is associated with heart disease or cardiovascular disease, but that only happens when LDL is oxidized. That's what they don't tell you. And furthermore, they point out that some of the foods that are favored, like meat, eggs, and that type of thing on the low carb diet, will raise plasma cholesterol levels. Also because of the high saturated fat content, the liver will kind of manufacture more cholesterol, that blah, blah, blah. The truth of the matter is, though, because of the lack of carbohydrates on the low-carb, high-fat diet, any fat you take in, including saturated fat, is going to be quickly oxidized. It's not going to stay around to cause problems. It's going to be oxidized. Again, it's not a balanced diet because it does lack certain nutrients. Again, the lack of dairy foods, you're going to have a source of calcium. If you don't eat enough, if you cut all fruits and vegetables out, you got the fiber problem again, the lack of dietary fiber. And there's a couple of other nutrients, but again, it's a great diet for losing body fat. And if you moderate it, in other words, if you use a moderate versions of it, you could stay on it for a longer amount of time. For example, you can do what they call a cyclical ketogenic diet, which would involve taking carbs before you train and after you train, and the rest of the time you don't eat any carbs. By doing that, you replace you replenish depleted glycogen stores. Muscle glycogen is basically stored carbohydrate. By having carbohydrate before you train and afterwards, you replenish diminished carbohydrate stores, which gives you the energy to train hard. Plus, you still get the fat loss benefits of a low-carb diet. The next one is a little bit more strict form of a low-carb diet, which is the ketogenic diet. The ketogenic diet is marked by almost no carbohydrate intake at all. The carnivore diet could be a form of the ketogenic diet if you don't eat any carbs. The ketogenic diet doesn't allow more than 20 to 25 grams of carbs a day. It's very strict, very strict. It was originally developed to treat epilepsy in the 1920s because the feature of the ketogenic diet, the reason it's called the ketogenic diet, is because it increases the production of metabolic acidic byproducts called ketone bodies, ketones for short. And ketones are actually an independent energy source. They could substitute for glucose in most tissues of the body. The notion that you have to have carbohydrates is nonsense because your body can use other, let's say, nutrients and convert them into glucose in the liver in the process called gluconeogenesis, which includes amino acids, lactate, and also ketones could supply energy to your muscles and your brain. So the ketogenic diet is, again, an excellent diet for losing body fat. In fact, of all the diets I know of, let me put it this way, let me rephrase this. If somebody came to me and said, I want a diet that's going to get me to the lowest body fat level in the fastest, in the most rapid amount of time, I'd tell them to try the ketogenic diet. Now, the ketogenic diet, again, it's a moderate protein, not very high protein. If you have too much protein on the ketogenic diet, it pulls you out of ketosis because your body will convert all that protein into glucose, so you're not really in a ketogenic state. So you have to have a moderate amount of protein, about 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. It is a high-fat diet. Now, this is where I differ with a lot of other people. Some people will tell you to have as much as 75% of daily calories as fat. On a ketogenic, I don't like that amount of fat. That to me is too much fat. Because a lot of it will probably be saturated fat, and even though you will burn off the saturated fat because of the lack of carbohydrates, an excessive amount of saturated fat tends to cause insulin insensitivity and other problems. It's also toxic to the beta cells of the pancreas that produce insulin. So I don't think you should go more than 50 to 60% fat on a ketogenic diet. And I still think that the emphasis should be on monounsaturated fats, like, for example, extra virgin olive oil, and also polyunsaturated fats, not so much omega-6, but stuff like, what was I thinking of? Omega-3, as found in fatty fish, halibut, mackerel, and sardines, that type of thing. Those are the two fats that should be emphasized. You can have some saturated fat. Saturated fat's not too bad. You don't want to cut it out completely because testosterone in the body needs two types of fat to be synthesized. One of them is monounsaturated, the other one's saturated. So saturated fat is not all bad. You just don't want to go crazy on them. So again, the ketogenic diet is good for short-term use. I used it when I got ready for a contest. That was the first diet I went on to get rid of all, immediate feedback, because when you went on a ketogenic diet, after about 5-6 days, you started losing fat like crazy, and it was very motivating. It allowed me to stay on the diet. I would stay on a ketogenic diet about 6 to 7 weeks, and then switch to a lower carbohydrate diet, where I gradually added carbohydrates back into the diet. The next diet is a diet that some people have used. It's basically you live on only meat and fish. That's it. It's kind of like it's basically a form of the carnivore diet, except it's even more restricted, because the carnivore diet allows, not just meat and fish, but a couple other foods too, as long as it doesn't contain carbohydrate or fruits or vegetables. But the meat-fish diet is basically meat, fish, nothing else. There was a famous bodybuilder who died not long ago named Dave Draper. A lot of young guys probably never heard of him. He was a very popular bodybuilder in the 70s. Dave Draper, the blonde bomber, they called it. And Dave started out as a really bulky, smooth bodybuilder when he came from New Jersey to Los Angeles. And then later on he got ripped. He was extremely vascular, very cut. And I asked him, I knew Dave, he was a friend of mine, and I said, Dave, what's the secret? How did you get that cut where your veins are just bulging out of your skin? How did you do it? And he answered in a very terse way, but it was accurate. He said, Jerry, I lived on tuna fish and water for 5 years. So I don't recommend that, believe me. But that's what he used to get cut, and it sure worked for him, let me tell you. So again, a meat-fish diet, very short term. Don't try and stay on it too long. It could cause problems. And by the way, in case you decide to go on a fish-only diet, if you go on a low-fat fish, and that's all you eat, like Phil Heath and some other people like to eat only fish, low-fat fish in the last 3-4 weeks before a contest. That's okay short term. But if you try and live on only fish all the time, you get this disease called Rabbit's disease. Look it up. I'm not going to go into details what it is, but you can get very, very sick if you try and live on only fish all the time, especially if it's low-fat fish. And that's the problem. The lack of fat is what causes the problem. Next one, of course, I've talked about this in previous videos. It's not popular with bodybuilders, but it's increasing in popularity. More and more bodybuilders are turning to vegetarian nutrition. Vegan, of course, there's various categories of vegetarian nutrition. Pescatarian eats only fish. Then they have the lacto-ovo, where they allow they allow milk and eggs. Bill Pearl, who 4-time Mr. Universe, was a lacto-ovo vegetarian. And then, of course, the most strict version is the vegan. The vegan diet literally eats only fruits and vegetables and nuts. No meat, no animal proteins at all. This diet is becoming increasingly popular for a number of reasons. There's ethical reasons where people love animals. I'm in that category, where they just don't like to eat any animals. There's also environmental reasons. The raising of cows and all that stuff destroys a lot of land. It uses up a lot of environmental resources. Then there's the health reasons. Some people think eating in a vegan style is more healthy, and that's kind of a debatable issue. I can tell you this, that if it's followed correctly, you can lose a lot of body fat on it, because vegan foods tend to be low in caloric density. They, like fruits and vegetables, they don't have a lot of calories, and they fill you up. So you wind up not eating a lot of food, and that makes you lose body fat. Again, the problem with vegan diets is, unless you do some research and find out what you need to supplement, you can get in serious health problems due to a lack of certain nutrients such as vitamin B12, iron, iodine. What else? Did I say B12? Yeah, B12, iron, iodine, a couple of calcium. All these foods, these are found in basically animal foods. They don't exist in fruits and vegetables to any great degree. Calcium does, but there's certain what they call anti-nutrients in fruits and vegetables that kind of block, like for example, oxalates, and in whole grains you got phytates that block calcium uptake. So calcium from fruits and vegetables is not the greatest source. The best source of calcium is always dairy foods, which is excluded on a vegan program. So if you're going to do a vegan nutrition, you'd have to definitely, you without question, are going to have to use supplements. I don't care what any of these, some of these, militant vegan advocates, they try and say you don't need to take any supplements on a vegan diet. The vegan foods will supply all the nutrients you need. Nonsense. That's bull. If you listen to these guys, you're going to get messed up. It's not true. So, a vegan diet. What about the protein? It used to be a problem with vegan diets, but with the advent of vegan-based protein supplements, such as pea protein, hemp protein, what's the other one? I can't remember. There's all kinds of them. Basically vegan-based protein powders. Protein is no longer a problem. It's easy to get all the protein you need on a vegan diet. So that's another option. Then they have the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet is so-called because it's based on the way people in the Mediterranean, like Italy, Greece, the type of foods they eat. It tends to emphasize a little bit of red wine. Extra virgin olive oil is a big feature of it. A good amount of mostly fruits and vegetables, mostly plant foods, a little bit of fish, a little bit of meat, not much. From a health perspective, the Mediterranean diet is probably, if you said to me, what is the healthiest year-round diet? A diet that you could stay on year-round and be healthy. I would tell you right away off the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet is the only diet that's been actually established that will increase longevity because of the many nutrients contained in the diet, like the extra virgin olive oil has substances in it which are very, very conducive to life extension. Also the polyphenols, antioxidants that are contained in the foods that are featured in the Mediterranean diet, they actually promote health in a tremendous way. The Mediterranean diet can be adjusted for bodybuilding purposes. You could you could increase the protein content a little bit, or maybe even take a protein supplement. And also, you could, if you're training for a contest, you could just reduce the fruit and vegetable intake and the grain intake. Just reduce it while you're preparing for a contest and stay on the rest of the diet. Will keep you nice and healthy. Another one I have to also mention is the so-called balanced diet. This is the diet that's recommended by most physicians, most registered dietitians. They say don't take any supplements. You don't need supplements. Supplements are bad. You should get all your nutrients from food. And you can if you eat a balanced diet. Balanced diet includes foods of various food groups, grains, fruits, vegetables, meat, fish, that type of thing. Those large variety of foods. The problem with the balanced diet is very few people actually follow a balanced diet. There's always certain foods that people won't eat. Some people don't like dairy foods. Some people don't like grains. Some people don't like fruits and vegetables. As soon as you do that, you're not on the balanced diet anymore. You're going to have supplements for the nutrients you're not getting on the diet. That's the problem with the balanced diet. But if you do truly eat a balanced diet, where you consume a large variety of foods, and I'm talking foods from every food group. The grains I'm not so sure about. I think that could be cut out. I think there's an overemphasis on whole grains. I don't think they're as great as people say they are. But anyway, for the rest of it, you actually will, it's a pretty healthy way to eat. Again, it can be adjusted by adjusting your carbohydrate and calorie intake. You can adjust it for bodybuilding purposes. And of course, if you do follow a truly balanced diet, you can stay on it all year round. That's one of the great advantages. The last diet I'm going to mention is the diet that's almost never used. It pops up every so often. That's why I'm including it in this video. It's basically the meal replacement diet. This is where you basically live on a meal replacement supplement. One of the first meal replacements occurred in the late 50s, early 60s. It was called Metrical. It came in a can. It was like a chocolate flavor. It was heavily advertised, and basically it wasn't meant to live on completely. The way it worked is you'd substitute, let's say you had ate 3 meals a day, you would at least one of your meals you would substitute Metrical, a can of Metrical, or maybe even 2 meals you would have another can of Metrical and 1 real food meal a day. Now Metrical didn't have much calories, and if you ate like that, you're eating 1 meal a day. Unless you eat a gigantic meal, you're definitely going to lose body fat because you're reducing your calories quite a bit. Metrical itself was a kind of a crappy supplement. They didn't know a lot about nutrition back there in the early 60s, and it had I think it was soy protein. It was very poorly balanced. I mean, it was dangerous to live on. Then they had there was another one that involved I can't remember, it was called the Last Chance Diet. This was in the late 70s, around 1976, and involved living on liquid amino acid, nothing else. Now, the problem with that is the liquid amino acid, you wound up being deficient in electrolytes, vital minerals that are needed for your heart to work properly, such as potassium, magnesium. A couple of women who went on the Last Chance Diet, it almost became their last chance. And for some, it was their last chance because they wound up dying on it due to electrolyte depletion. But again, it was very low in calories, and you could lose weight on it. But again, the form of protein, the amino acid, liquid amino acids that were featured on that Last Chance Diet were low quality. They were basically collagen protein, very low quality protein. I know collagen's big now, but it's not something you want to live on all the time because, among other things, it's completely deficient in an essential amino acid tryptophan. So it's not something you want to live on. But again, if you lived on the liquid aminos, you would lose body fat. For short term, you could probably get away with it, especially if you supplement those electrolytes that are missing. You throw in some calcium, potassium, magnesium. Yeah, you could probably stay on it for a couple of weeks and lose a lot of fat very quickly. It had there was no fat content whatsoever, and no carbohydrates. I mean, it was just pure protein. But I used a meal replacement diet. There was a supplement, I think it's still around today, I really haven't looked, called Metrix. I was given 2 blank cans. They were 2 large tin cans. One was called Base, the other one was called Plus. It had no label on it. It was given to me by a friend of mine. This stuff wasn't on the market yet. He just told me to take, I believe it was 1 scoop out of each can and just live on it. In other words, 1 scoop out of the Plus, 1 scoop out of the other one, the Plus, and I can't, 1 scoop out of each can, and you count that as a meal and have it as instead of food. So you'd have like 3, 4, 5 times a day, whatever you want. And I was told I could live on this stuff, and it was at a period when I wanted to lose a lot of body fat. Well, to make a long story short, I lived on this yet unproduced supplement, which later was produced as Metrix. Didn't even have a name back then. It was just 2 cans, Plus and Base. That's all it was. I followed the directions. I lived on it. It was very tasty. It tasted delicious, by the way. I mixed it in water, didn't use any milk. I stayed on it for, I think, 3 months, if I remember correctly. 3 or 4 months. I don't know exactly. It was the early 80s. And I lost 40 pounds. I lost about 5 inches on my waist. And the thing that shocked me most, and I was exercising, I was working out, I was doing aerobics. But the thing that really shocked me about that diet was I couldn't have been taking too many calories because it was just a powder. The supplement had some fat in it, but not a lot of fat. Didn't have a lot of carbohydrates, and it didn't have a lot of calories. And you would expect to lose a lot of muscle after 3 or 4 months eating that way. But I didn't. In fact, I wasn't taking any drugs, no steroids, no growth hormone. I can honestly say I lost very little muscle. I'm not going to say I didn't lose any muscle, but surprisingly little muscle for 40 pounds of weight loss. So what I'm saying is that 40 pounds was almost pure body fat. My waist went down 5 or 6 inches. I don't remember exactly. And people even noticed it in the gym. I mean, I really slimmed down on this stuff, and I even maintained most of my strength. Got a little bit weaker towards the end, but I maintained most of my strength. But here's the funny part of this story. When Metrix was introduced to the commercial supplement market, about a year later, I said, well, I'm going to go back on that Metrix diet to, lose some body fat. So I tried the commercial version. Honestly, I couldn't last a day on it. One day I was starving to death. Whatever was in the original Base Plus form knocked out my appetite. There's a rumor that it had clenbuterol, the drug clenbuterol. And I asked the guy who developed the product, I asked him directly, does it have clenbuterol? He didn't answer me. He just smiled. So I'll leave it. To this day, I don't know what was in the Base and the Plus that knocked out my appetite, but it sure as hell did. I wasn't hungry. But when I tried the commercial version, I was starving. It was not the same stuff. So that's about it. That's some of the more popular diets. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to have by the way, if you want more information about nutrition, exercise science, anti-aging research you can use today, ergogenic aids, hormonal therapy, the most effective fat loss techniques, women's health and fitness, subscribe to my Applied Metabolics newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. It's 30 to 50 pages every month, solid evidence-based information that includes my nearly 60 years of experience both in the gyms and studying. There's nobody that can equal my level of experience. I also have over 4 decades of writing experience as a professional writer. I know how to write. I know how to communicate. You will understand everything I write in Applied Metabolics. You don't have to take out a medical dictionary like you do with some of these other digital publications, which are, they're good. It's great information in those other publications. It's just that very hard to understand without a science background. You don't need that with Applied Metabolics. So subscribe today, www.appliedmetabolics, and thank you for listening. Oh, before I forget, if you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, go to your local shelter and adopt a dog. They are the best.